Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another TenX Strategies webinar on how you can supercharge your fundraising efforts. We've been on a roll recently talking about what we should do with respect to end-of-year fundraising, end-of-year gratitude programs. We know it's a season for Thanksgiving. We know it's a season for giving, and our generous donors have put us in the position to achieve so much. How should we think about this? 2 weeks ago, John Davis from the Leadership Institute talked about their philosophy with respect to the approach on gratitude and how a program with Morton Blackwell's honey has grown into their sending over 80,000 jars of honey to their most generous contributors, which is just mind-boggling. And then last week, Nathan Hill from Next After talked about a lot of the opportunities in the digital and online space, emphasizing that by his calculation, 38% of charitable contributions that are made online are made in the last 45 days of the calendar year, and what you should be doing to think about not just Giving Tuesday, but the last 7 or 10 days of the year, and a lot of other things related to that. But I'm really pleased to have with us today David Ridenour from the National Center for Public Policy Research. David's an old friend, and he has something that got my attention. Myself, as a contributor to the National Center, has received this terrific box of coconut macaroons at Christmas time. And in terms of cutting through the clutter, it certainly does, just given the reason I'm talking about it right now. I can't tell you about other things I've received, but that's something that has clearly stood out. So we thought we'd talk about this in the form of a case study and what you might learn from it, what lessons could be applied to your work in multiple ways. And I'm just going to dig right in. David Ridenour, it's great to have you. For the benefit of folks on the call, tell us a little bit about, first, the National Center for Public Policy Research.
Sure. The National Center for Public Policy Research was established 42 years ago to be a different kind of think tank, really a do tank. So what we're focusing on is growing the free market movement by reaching out to those constituencies that have not always been receptive to our message. You see that through every one of our programs. We have a program called Project 21 that's building support for our ideas among minorities. We have a new program called Able Americans, which is reaching into the 100 million constituency, disabilities constituency, to grow that by offering an alternative to the big government programs that are offered by the left. And then we also have something called the Free Enterprise Project, where we're trying to get corporate America to move back to the center, abandon progressive activism, and get back to their free market missions. It does all sorts of things like file shareholder resolutions, file lawsuits, show up at shareholder meetings to beat up on corporate CEOs that have become woke. And it's been very effective. So those are our three major programs.
Well, thank you. And certainly your founder, your late wife, Amy Moritz Ridenour, was quite an inspirational figure, a visionary leader, and appreciate all that she did and set in motion, and appreciate that you're continuing to carry the baton forward, and appreciate all that you do. So tell us about the coconut macaroons, how this program started, and how you sort of approached it conceptually, philosophically, and then how you've operationalized it over time.
Well, before talking about the very long journey in getting to this project, let me describe a little bit more about what we do. One of the huge challenges that we face is, how do you express your gratitude to a donor without showing them that you're wasting their money? In some cases, you send a big expensive gift. What's their reaction? I don't want gifts. I want you to put that towards programs. So that was a real big challenge. And one of the important things I think for everybody to remember is that the gifts don't have to be expensive. The most important thing is that they have some personal meaning, some personal connection, so that you can deepen your relationship with the donors. I kind of make them akin to refrigerator art. When your kid comes home from the first grade, gives you that portrait that they've made of the family, you're not putting it on the refrigerator because it is a masterpiece. you're putting it on the refrigerator because it has some meaning. So whatever we do has to have some meaning. So what we started, and I'll tell you a little bit about how we got into it. But about 20 years ago, we started sending out cookies to our donors. And it was on a rotating basis initially. We had all sorts of interesting recipes from my great-great-grandfather's bakery, the Cole Bakery, which was located in Delphus, Ohio, and was in operation until right before the Japanese dropped the bomb on Pearl Harbor. Some of the cookies, like they're orange drops, where you take a whole orange and grind it up, and that's in the cookie. Another used dry ammonia, which is kind of unusual. It was used as a leavening agent back then, and it was called hartshorn, which was made from ground up reindeer antlers. So you can see how I might have used that in the letter that went out around Christmas time. Anyway, we switched over to the coconut macaroons because they just seemed to be so popular, but also they were extraordinarily durable. So when you're dealing with baked goods, you can have them, they're crumbling apart or they're sticking or something like that. We never had that problem with the macaroons, and I'm just going to pull up one right now. This is from last year. They're still a little bit soft, so they were extraordinarily durable. Now, the initial process for this was we'd send them out in customized canisters. And this was an enormous undertaking because every one of them had to be put in a box with stuffing material. It was always a challenge figuring out how much material you had to order. And then there was the problem with the post office. Every single one of them had a different amount of postage that went on it, depending on where it went. Hawaii would be enormously expensive, like $20, whereas in the local area, it wouldn't cost so much. So I got to thinking, how can we make this a little bit easier? Because my staff was about to kill me. In order to make the deadlines, because, when you've got fresh baked goods, you want to get them out within a day or two. And we were having a real challenge with that, always making the postal deadlines just under the wire. And the last thing that you really need at the end of the year, when you've got those year-end campaigns going, is for your development staff to be stressed out. They've got enough things to be stressed about. So I got to thinking there are these things that are, the flat rate ship envelopes, bubble ones. So I thought, what if we could find something that we could repackage it in? So we just slid it in, and then it would all go out at one rate. We run out the labels, take very little time to do it. And we did find a box 6x6x2 that we started putting the macaroons in, and they were really fantastic holiday themed boxes, very hard so that the cookies wouldn't get crushed. And then we began doing that. And I think we cut the amount of time that we put into shipping this stuff out to, about 80 to 100 of them per hour. And we cut it by about a third. So my staff was very much happy with that. And then more recently, we ran into problems with getting those boxes. So we went to a customized one. And those of you who have seen what Kevin sent around, you could see that it's almost a blatant ripoff of See's Candies for their holiday box. We have a photo of my grandfather Kale on the top of it with a little bit of holly. And that's gone very, very well. So let me tell you about the long route to get here. I was looking for something like Morton's honey. I wasn't going to take up beekeeping, and besides, he already had that covered. And I didn't really think that things like doing preserves and sending them out was very, very practical given staff limitations. So what we did initially is we went to Harry and David's. Now, I'm originally from a small town in Southern Oregon near Medford. Medford is where Harry and David's is located. So I had a personal connection with it, not just by the location, but also because, one of my fondest memories growing up is my mom getting the rejects, of the fruits there and making preserves. So I had that connection. The second connection is My mom was semi-retired and she took seasonal work over at Harry and David's. And also she was a Harry and David's caroler. So you can go and you can tell this whole story about it. Now, we had mixed reaction to that. We had some donors that were very upset that we had spent the money on the preserves. We sent preserves. And they let us know about it because they wanted the money to be used on programs. But we did receive a call from a fellow by the name of Michael Kaiser, who was the co-founder of Recycled Paper Greetings. He was located in Chicago, but he said, Medford, he called up, thank you for the gift. I got this. I see that you're from the Medford area. Do you know a little town called Lake Creek? Because I just bought a ranch there and bought the general store. Turned out that that general store is 1.5 miles from my house. And my brother and I used to always ride our bikes up there when we were kids to buy RC colas because we were going to strike it rich because under the lid they had sometimes monetary amounts that you could cash in. So there was a connection there. And as a result of that, he increased his support to us next gift by tenfold. Again, there was that connection, and I think that's very important. But, we got enough of a negative reaction that I tried something different after that, and that was to do oil paintings, do an original oil painting for the donors. And, just so you guys aren't thinking that I went out and took art lessons or something, my parents had taught me the fundamentals of oil painting when I was a small kid. We did this for a couple of years. Then my own kids arrived, and my blossoming art career was all over. I won't make some great claims about it, but one year we did a prayer at Valley Forge, or my rendition of it. And I don't make any claims that it was absolutely fantastic, but some donors really liked it, including I don't know if you remember Kevin, the Broadduses in Virginia. Died a number of years ago, but they were big conservative donors, and they used it as their Christmas card that year. They loved it so much. So now let me move over to the reaction that we've been having. I'll just tell you a couple of stories. One, I received a call from a donor who said, while he couldn't guarantee that they would upgrade their donations, they would never stop donating to us because his wife had promised to divorce him if he stopped donating to us because we gave those tasty macaroons. A second donor called from Florida asking where if he was eligible for the macaroons this year. And as it happened the day before, I had signed his letter. So I said, it's on its way to you, because I know for sure, because I signed the letter yesterday, so you should get it in just a couple of days. His response was, the thing that really makes you stand out, in addition to the fact that your direct mail copy always has a lot of detail on impact, is the macaroons. He had been a $1,000 giver. The check that came a couple of days later was $25,000. Now, we don't just give this to our individual donors. We also send it off to foundations. We've been doing that for a number of years. And last year I was up at a party in New York. Some of you may be familiar with the Randolph Foundation, Heather Higgins. She and her husband have an annual Christmas party up there with a couple of hundred folks. I arrived and she pulled me aside and said, your macaroons are so great. We prepared them to serve everybody here. And sure enough, there's a whole platter of the macaroons, smaller size than the ones that we send to our donors.
Well, these are some terrific stories, and I think they're inspiring us all to think about what is appropriate and unique for us to utilize, but it's an encouragement, and it does sort of demonstrate, the first of Viggory's 4 horsemen of marketing, that positioning. When you were in such an over-communicated world, it's hard to be that purple cow that really stands out. But when you do something like this, it clearly does. And you've given us a lot of anecdotal evidence that it really pays off. Just interested to know more, and I'll watch the chat and the Q&A. And folks, if you want to jump in with any questions, please feel free, and I'll ask David. But just tell us more as well about how you operationalize it. Who do you send it to? What's the process? It sounds like you've probably come up with a better way than you did originally that was driving your staff crazy. Just tell us more. What advice would you give?
So my advice would be plan well ahead of time. Now we are doing custom boxes. And because we started that last year, we bought enough sufficient supplies for multiple years. So we're all set there. The only thing we have to do is develop the list, which that alone is quite an undertaking. But we have to talk to the baker, which we've talked to the baker already. They're prepared. And then we have to get the one ships, the flat rates from the USPS, and we're good to go. It takes us now only 2 half days to go through 800. Now we're not doing 80,000. I can't imagine doing that kind of volume. But one thing I would kind of like to solicit input from the folks who are listening during question and answers time. I'm thinking of expanding it, not by sending more macaroons, but rather by sending the story and a recipe card, also indicating that, if you reach a certain level, of course, we'll send you some of these, but then soliciting the donors to send in their own recipes. And if we have a sufficient number of recipes, we'll do a recipe book that we'll send out next year to everybody. And that, of course, will cost an awful lot less than what we're doing.
Well,
But
look
I'd
forward
be
to people's
interested to see
comments.
what
And I think we've
people's
got
thoughts are.
one already, but John Davis shared with respect to Leadership Institute that they tried to figure out, first of all, one lesson they learned is they try to send it out earlier, and they try to get the honey out now right around Thanksgiving because
Right.
there's more of a time for it to, well, first of all, it resonates more because when you're getting stuff, the last 10 days before Christmas, it's just a lot of stuff going on. People may be traveling. But frankly, it also gave more of a window for people to sort of respond back in a
Right.
reciprocal gratitude. And so he shared that some of the things they've done is they'll have like a wallet flap business reply envelope inside that's not asking for a contribution per se, but it's maybe inviting recipes that could be made with honey, that sort of thing. And of course, it becomes an easy vehicle when somebody says, wow, who is this group again that sent me the honey? I think I'm going to send them a contribution because, as we know, many donors are not overthinking this stuff. They don't even know our organizations that well as we wish they
Right.
did. And so this really cuts through. So the first question I got is, what is the per unit cost? I know you're going to get into the particulars, David. And again, I'll welcome other questions and comments, but keep on going.
So sure, in terms of per unit costs, it's between 15 and $20 a piece. The cookies themselves cost about, I'd say about $6, a buck a cookie, then another $4 for the box, and then shipping is really the big expense. It'll ordinarily be about, I think it's now up to about $10, maybe a little bit less. So it's not too expensive, but too expensive to send to some donors. And like what has been done with the Leadership Institute and its honey, we don't ask for any kind of donation in this. We ask them whether or not they would like a copy of the recipe. And that's really been the vehicle. If somebody's going to ask you for the recipe, they're going to go, well, just maybe we ought to give them a donation as well. But there's a full story on the background of the bakery. The bakery was established in 1880 approximately, and it was established twice. And sometimes we mention that because my great-great-grandfather started the bakery. It burned down. He went back to the Alsace, raised some money, then came back and started again. That gives you a perfect story of perseverance that, we can say that's part of our DNA at the National Center. And we kind of mix up the story a little bit. The bakery was there from 1880 until 1941, November. We give the details of my great-great-grandfather being a French Army officer who came to the United States shortly after the Franco-Prussian War. And every year there's a little bit something more that's added, including one year we found out that Zane Grey, does everybody know who Zane Grey is? The novelist, wrote Westerns. He used to play for the Delphus Reds. Delphus is the town where the bakery was, and my grandfather was also a baseball player. And although we couldn't prove it, it is highly likely that they competed with each other at some point. So it's always a matter of keeping it just a little bit fresh, same basic details, but adding a lot of details. And I'll point out that details are really, really, really important. Details like time, like place, like hobbies, like activities, because you never know which one of these is going to resonate with the donor. I've had donors call up because of the town, as that example was that I gave you earlier. It was the same town where he had a ranch. I've had people call me because they lived in Delphus, Ohio. I've had people calling me about baseball because I mentioned it in the letter. So I think these things are critically important to give enough detail where you have enough intersections with your donors that they feel that they can call and talk to you about it. And here's the key. I mean, we've all been trying to reach out to donors. We know how telephone calls go these days. Really, really difficult. People have their defenses up. They put it on an answering machine or it goes to dead air. And through this, we're able to capture not only phone numbers and email addresses, but establish a relationship maybe with somebody that we haven't had it with before.
This is really good practical advice, and I love the point. I mean, we all know that storytelling is so important, but you're right. All these are just multiple little hooks that in unexpected ways people can grab onto and have a reason. And, people are looking for authenticity. They're looking for connection. They're looking for community, and you're providing that in a very genuine way. And you say about 800 donors or so. That's a lot, but it's also manageable. I don't know whether you hand sign those 800 letters or how you review it?
I hand sign the 800.
Well, that's extraordinary. Well, what is the threshold? What are the kinds of donors that you're sending to? Anything else that you might share in that dimension?
So what we have been focusing on is our capacity to do it. So at the beginning of the year, I have a set number that I can mail to. And here's where it really, really, really gets difficult is pulling the data. Because, you have somebody who's a first-time giver in the current calendar year who gives you 250 or above. They have a much higher capability, and you want to keep them in. Then there are well screens that we've all seen. We have to take into account what somebody's capacity is. But one thing that I would really encourage people not to do is ignore the smaller dollar donors, and we have some of them getting these who have given repeatedly. We have people who have given 50, 60, 70, 80 times, and even more over a long period of time. And statistically speaking, these are the individuals who are going to remember your organization in their will. And I just have one example of that. A couple of years ago, we received a $336,000 bequest from an individual that I'd never been able to talk to. They were giving more at that $50 level, but they had given repeatedly. And I thought, we should make sure to include them on this mailing. Now, I can't prove that it was the macaroons, but, if I had to bet, it was the macaroons because literally I had never talked to them because I could never reach them.
Well, this is great. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, just pop them into the Q&A or the chat. I'm glad to ask David. This has just been really helpful. And I'm guessing you get a lot of notes and things in response. And then do you just sort of, what do you do with the data that you collect back? I mean, that can be almost burdensome to some degree. What do you do? Does it just influence you generally? Does it temper your thinking about a particular donor with respect to follow-up or cultivation plans? How do you incorporate all of that?
Well, sort of all of the above, but one of the other things that we do as part of this mailing is we let them know that I'm setting my visitation schedule for the next year. And if they're interested in a visit or a call or whatever, just let us know. And through that, we've been able to arrange quite a few meetings with donors where we have face-to-faces. And then, that relationship deepens even more as a result of that.
Well, that's a really helpful tip. And by the way, just an encouragement to folks, I know, for example, the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, they sent gifts either from Wendy Graham or from Maurice McTeague, who was the New Zealand cabinet minister who'd overseen a lot of the dramatic economic reforms there back in the day. And these were, Wendy's was a little can of macadamia nuts with a story about how her grandparents immigrated to cut sugarcane in Hawaii and how her parents, raised her, and then she was regulating sugarcane futures as the head of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission under President Reagan. So it was a great story, multiple ways. And you're right, you get those kinds of notes from somebody who grew up there or whatever it may be. And then the ones from Mars McTeague were generally something about like a keychain about a kiwi or a koala bear or something like that. It could be a Christmas ornament. It would stand out, but there was always the story. So great point.
Well, I get things like fudge and cake and cookies sent back to me too. So I'm set for the holidays as well.
All right. Another question in the chat is, what do you say about your organization in the context of the letter or the message that accompanies the gift? Do you weave it in? Is it a separate sheet? Is it a pictorial item? What do you do?
So we weave it in. The general cadence of these letters is the same all the time. It begins something along the lines that words cannot express my gratitude for all that you've done over the past year. So I'm going to say it with macaroons. Then we tell the story, 1880s is when this was established, et cetera, et cetera. And then we say, none of our work would be possible without you. And then we go through a short recap, not real long. It'll be bullets like number of times Black Leadership Network Project 21 people were on TV, number of shareholder proposals, how many of them got through, how many corporations capitulated to us, et cetera. And it's just in bullet form. So this is really like a one-pager. It's not excessive. Front page has the story as well as those bullets. And then the backside invites people to let us know their availability for meetings and whether or not they want recipe cards.
All right. Well, we want to wrap this up and keep it to about half an hour. I have two last questions. One in the queue is, how many people does it take to get 800 packages out in two or 3 days?
About three.
Oh, wow. Well, you run
Yeah,
an efficient
and
operation. You've got a
really
very talented development team.
Well, so everything comes to us in the boxes already. We're not packing boxes. The bakery does that. So all we're doing is sliding them in, sealing the letter and the cookies in it, and slapping a label on it. And because every single one of them costs the same amount, it's all pretty easy to do.
Well, I'll put the name of your organization again in the follow-up communication I'll send everybody on the webinar today, but the National Center for Public Policy Research, David Ryden Hour. If you want to make a contribution and get some cookies, I guess $250 is the threshold, but I don't want to give away your trade secrets. David, thank you for doing this. What's your final parting words of advice that you would give to folks who are on today?
I'm going to give a couple of them, the do's and don'ts. So the don't is don't send an expensive gift because of the reaction that you're going to get from donors. You can send and should send gifts of nominal value, but those that you have a personal connection with that will help you connect more with donors. Don't wait until the last minute. We've had a few disasters in previous years where we couldn't get the supplies that we want. Similarly, have a contingency plan. A couple of years ago, during COVID, there were supply chain problems and we couldn't get 200 pounds worth of coconut, no matter what we did. So we switched to a different cookie. And then just don't make things complicated. Just as I was saying earlier, if you're stressing your staff out, that's going to harm them in other ways and their productivity in other ways. Provide a lot of detail in your letters so that you have those connections. And then finally, be very, very thoughtful about your data selection. It's not all about how much they gave, but sometimes it's about how much they can give. And sometimes you don't know how much they can give.
Terrific. This is great, David Ridenour. Thank you. And appreciate it very much. Thank you for all your good work in support of our shared principles. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We'll be back to you next week. Ann Fitzgerald is going to talk to us about what you should be doing now for the new year and how you should think about not only the year end, but turning into the new year about positioning yourself for the beginning of 2025. All right. Thanks a lot. And again, David Ridenour, thank you.
Thank you.